more of the shooters were arrested and, as that's been reported, are in custody. One of those arrested, as it's been reported, was out on bond for other violent crimes within this area in the last 2 years. In other words, the crime wave that has plagued the capital city of Jackson, Mississippi, as the crime wave has crashed within the gates here at the State Fairgrounds as of Saturday night. This is totally and completely unacceptable. It will not be tolerated. And as illustrated by the events of Saturday night, our team here at the Fairgrounds, our security officers, will respond quickly and effectively to end any threat. That was true Saturday night, it will be true today, and it will be true tomorrow. And if any criminals are watching, they need to understand, or would be criminals, that any lawlessness on this State Fairgrounds will be met with appropriate response. Now, our hearts go out to all those who were affected. There were victims who were caught in the crossfire Saturday night. Thankfully, the one person who lost their life was not one of the innocent bystanders, but was in fact one of the shooters. That's unfortunate. Our hearts go out to that family as well, and to all the families involved, but especially the victims. But the reality is, all Mississippians are victims of this kind of tragedy, this kind of crime. The crime situation in Jackson is real. I can tell you from my own personal experience, having worked in the downtown area for over 20 years, much has changed in 20 years. The threats are real, they are new, they are ever growing, and it is a problem we cannot overlook, we cannot afford to overlook. We've been out and about in this fairgrounds very actively trying to rebuild the walls, if you will, of this fairgrounds, to rebuild the growth and the future and the promise of this State Fairgrounds. We're meeting in a brand new atrium that was just completed during COVID-19. Brand new trademark completed thanks to the legislature's support and investment. We have recently renovated the entire Coliseum here at the State Fairgrounds. We have made renovations to our livestock barns. We have plans for more renovations. And this event will not interrupt our plans to improve and rebuild the walls of this fairgrounds. But this is bigger than the fairgrounds. This is about the city. It's actually bigger than the city. It's about the county. It's bigger than the county because it's about the state of Mississippi. It's about rebuilding the walls of safety and security within this capital city. The Bible has something to say about that. In the book of Nehemiah, we've got an example. A man called by God to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, a city that had broken down and been overrun by criminals. And in the book of Nehemiah, chapter 4, verse 9, it's clear that not everybody wanted to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. There were enemies. It says Tobiah, Sanballat, Ammonites, and Asherites heard that the walls of Jerusalem were being made up, and the breaches began to be stopped. And it says they were very wroth. They were mad as could be. And it says they conspired together against Jerusalem to fight against it, to hinder it. And Nehemiah says, nevertheless, we made our prayer to God that we posted a guard. He said we're going to pray and we're going to post a guard. Now tomorrow, as evidence that we're not going to be hindered, we're going to host a national day of prayer inside the Mississippi Coliseum beginning at 11 o'clock. I want to invite every citizen of this city, of this county, of this state of goodwill who wants to come and to pray for the peace of this city and pray for the rebuilding of these walls, for peace to come. But we're going to post a guard too. That's what we've been doing, and we're going to keep doing it. And in the end, as they began to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, it says every worker who was involved in building the walls had to fight with a sword in one hand and a trowel in the other. We'll do what it takes to defend this fairground. We'll do what it takes to defend our city. Now, fortunately, Saturday night, we had multiple law enforcement officers not only respond, but our law enforcement officers under contract were on the scene at the very moment the incident We appreciate Commissioner Sean Tindall, Department of Public Safety, MDI is investigating this, and all those who are involved. We appreciate all of our law enforcement officers. But today, these officers are heroes. I want to be very clear about where we are in the capital city. And as you know, the fairgrounds is right here in the capital city. I want you to make no mistake about it. I and you, and all law-abiding citizens and stakeholders in this city, we are at war with the criminal element in this city. Nothing less than war. They have declared war. It is up to us to finish it. We are at war with an increasingly emboldened and increasingly youthful criminal element, apparently gang elements, that have no regard for life and no regard for the law, and they must be stopped. Now, I've had people, since I've been commissioner, tell me we should just abandon this fairgrounds and move it somewhere else. Well, we can't do that because the law provides that state fairgrounds shall be in Jackson, Mississippi. Unless the legislature changes the law, that's where it is. I've had people tell me that the state should abandon the city of Jackson and the state capital and just move somewhere else and hand it over and start over. That's the one thing we cannot do. I totally disagree with that sentiment because when you're at war, you don't retreat. You don't give up ground. To do so would cede this territory to the worst of the worst, the criminal element that already has their eyes on Jackson. To give up and walk away and not defend this city would result in criminals bleeding over into surrounding neighborhoods, communities, counties, both sides, north and south. And like a weed, it will spread until it's uprooted. We have no option but to take the fight to the criminals and to take it up by the roots. Every law-abiding citizen who's living in Jackson, who's working in Jackson, those who visit the city, those who come to our events, all of us are stakeholders in making sure the criminals don't win. We have a stake and we have a goal, a common goal, I think, of reclaiming this city from the criminal element to restore law and order in Jackson, Mississippi, and in doing so, bring about peace to this community once again. And I'm convinced that can happen. But when you're at war, you don't retreat. We will not retreat. We will take this fight to the enemy. We will deal with any threat that comes within the boundaries of this fairground. And we will rebuild the walls of safety and security on this fairgrounds. And I want to be a part of helping rebuild the walls of safety and security for the entire city. And I will work with anybody, any official, any person who wants to work with me. And I've already had conversations with our legislature, with members of the judiciary, with our executive agencies. I'm speaking on behalf of the people of the state of Mississippi as the Commissioner of Agriculture and Commerce. My power is somewhat limited outside the walls of this fairgrounds, but I will work with and help and be an influence for good wherever I can. Jackson, Mississippi is by law our state's capital city. It is home to the state capital. It is the seat of state government and the statewide executive, judicial, and legislative operations. By law, it is the location of most every state agency in Mississippi. Agency heads work here. State workers work here every day. By law, it is the location of the state fairgrounds. By law, it is the headquarters of the Department of Agriculture and Commerce. So events here that occur are of statewide concern, and they should be the concern of every Mississippian who cares about the future of the whole state. This is our capital city. This is the picture that's portrayed to the people around this country, the people around this world. As I travel the world and promote Mississippi, people ask about Jackson, what's going on. So it's a concern to me. We're not going to abandon it. And when you're at war, you don't give your battle plan to the enemy. We do have security plans here for every event, every single event that has happened and is coming up. We have security plans in place. We'll not be discussing the details of those plans. I don't want them to fall into the criminal hands. But you should know, and every criminal should know, we have a plan, and it will be executed if they come down and get breaking the law. Like a weed in the field of crops, this criminal element, you can't just pluck a leaf here or pluck a leaf there. It's going to continue to grow and spread. That's what we see happening. Like a weed in a field of good crops, that weed's got to be uprooted. That's what we've got to do. We've got to take the fight against criminals. We've got to win. We're not going to retreat. We will be hosting our events here at the fairgrounds today, tomorrow, all the way through. We'll be doing it safely. We'll be doing it securely. I want to say again, we will not tolerate, I will not tolerate lawlessness on the state fairgrounds. We will act appropriately every single time. And because it's an ongoing broader investigation, I'm not able to comment on particularly the details of the April 30th event, other than what I've said. I want to express my appreciation to the MDI, to the officers, Commissioner Tindall. He and I served the legislature together years ago. His team at DPS did a great job, and I look forward to working with them together as we move ahead. But I do want to spend the next few minutes talking about what I believe to be the deeper root of this crime wave. The deeper sickness of which Saturday's event is a symptom. You've got to get to the root of the problem. You've got to get to the sickness. And that is, I believe, the overwhelming backlog, the logjam, the delay in the judicial system in this area that's been caused by the overwhelming crime activities in this area. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not blaming anybody except the criminals who have done this. They're the ones to blame. They're the ones who should be arrested and punished and put in jail for a long time. But criminals must be made to understand that there are real penalties for breaking the law. There are real consequences for their actions. It begins at home, and our parents at home have the responsibility, the primary responsibility of teaching our children what is right and what is wrong. But when that fails, as it obviously has, it comes to law enforcement, to the judicial system to make sure penalties are applied swiftly and certainly. And for whatever reason, that has not been happening in this capital city. It does our officers no good. It does the people in this city no good to arrest criminals, to warehouse them for 48 hours and turn them right back out on the streets. It does no one any good to do that. You've got to follow through to the indictment, the trial, the prosecution, the conviction, and prison, where these criminals belong. People who are a danger to society belong behind bars, not on the street. Justice must be rendered clearly, swiftly, certainly. You may ask, how do you know anything about this? What authority do you have? Well, I'm just a commissioner of agriculture, but it may seem like a long time ago, but just a few years ago, I was co-chairman of the state's Criminal Justice Task Force. We studied these issues from the top down with the evidence-based findings about what worked in the punishment of crime and what didn't work, what worked to deter crime, and what works to rehabilitate those non-violent offenders who are getting off the wrong path. We looked at all that and we put into place some very strong laws. The first time we defined what a violent crime is. And we determined as a legislature just a few years ago that violent criminals should be behind bars. We looked at it and we found that at that time, just a few years ago, violent criminals were serving only 40% of their sentence in general before they were out back on the street. We changed that law, took it to 75%, because we understand there's a difference between those who were mad at it and those who were afraid of it. The people who committed this crime Saturday are people we should be afraid of, concerned about, and make sure they are behind bars, not out on bond and able to commit other crimes. Criminals who believe their actions will have no consequences, that's the problem. And sadly, we see a large number and a growing number of young people, juveniles, and to the young people who are watching, I want to say this. It's not in my notes, but I want you to hear this from me. There is a greater purpose for you than for tearing down walls. There's a greater purpose for you in life than hurting other people. There's a greater purpose for you than walking around with a gun like a gangster. There's a greater purpose for you. And there are people around you, and I'm one of those people that want to help you find that purpose, achieve that purpose, and not in the way so many criminals do. I want to invite churches to be a part of the solution. Families must be a part of the solution. At the end of the day, when all that fails, it comes to law enforcement, it comes to the judicial system. The old saying, if you keep doing what you've been doing, you're going to keep getting what you've been getting. We've been watching on television now at our home, and we watch the nightly news almost every night, some shooting in and around this city. It's a tragedy. People who are trying to help make a difference get killed, like it's been reported over in Clinton. This crime wave must be pushed back. It falls to us. We need to quit talking about it and start doing something about it, and I want to be part of that solution. Rather than keep doing what we've been doing, we need to change what we've been doing, dramatic change, and put people who are a danger to society behind bars and make sure they stay there. Another thing we did when I was in the legislature, you see a map here, what's called the Capitol Complex Improvement District. I think this is probably one of the greatest pieces of legislation that's been adopted in the legislature. I talked to a senator this morning who agreed with that, and what it did, what it does, is provide Capitol Police, state Capitol Police enforcement authority in this entire broad area, recognizing that this is the Capitol Complex. And the fairgrounds is part of the Capitol Complex. We host the largest events in the state of Mississippi right here every year. And we're going to keep doing it. Well, I want to say a special thanks to our Capitol Police. They actually control this area every day. They're out here right now, so their cars patrolling, checking out things. So we have state law enforcement authority. Recently, within the past 2 years, I located our Department of Agriculture Ag Theft Bureau inside the Coliseum, on the north side of the Coliseum. They're stationed there. We only have 8 agents, but most of them travel the state, but we do have law enforcement presence here, state law enforcement all the time. Now, one option that was discussed when I was in the legislature, I have 3 options to throw out to you. There may be other ideas and better ideas, and I'm open to any. But one option that's been discussed is if the local county system can't handle the docket and the crime wave and the load of criminal activity, then possibly it could be created a Capitol Complex Improvement District judicial system of its own, with special judges that fast-track these cases and hold these criminals accountable. If they understand they cross that line right there, they're going to be sent to prison for a long, long time quickly, with due process of law. That's one option. Another option would be to create enhanced penalties for crimes caused here in this Capitol complex or around the state capitol. I had a legislator call me and told me they found bullet cases in the parking lot of the state capitol the other day. This is not an isolated incident. This is, as I said, a symptom of a much deeper problem. So another option could be enhanced penalties within this zone as considered an attack upon the state capitol, on the state of Mississippi. But the best option, in my opinion, the very best option is to use the resources we already have. The judges who've already been elected, the district attorneys, I know that they're good people. I think they're people of goodwill. They want to do the right thing. Their system has been overwhelmed, and they need our help and our support to use the tools we already have to fast-track these criminals' cases, to try them and send them to prison. I want to be part of that solution. And I have it on good authority, talking to judicial members around the state, that the judiciary is already working toward that solution. I'm encouraged by that. And just yesterday, I was requested and I agreed to make available our buildings here, this trademark, the Coliseum, to the extent they're available for jury selection. You can't try cases without a jury. You can't put criminals in prison without a jury to convict them. And we need our jurors around the city and the county to step up and participate. It may not seem like an exciting part of life to get a juror summons, but it's very important because it's the first step in fighting back against these criminals. So our buildings will be made available to the Hinds County judicial system for jury selection. I want to urge the public to participate. But it's going to take all of us working together to get this done. It's going to take all of us working together across party lines, across racial lines, across religious lines, and other dividing lines. We've got to all be working together to rebuild the walls in this city. Jackson and Hinds County, with our law enforcement officers, with our prosecutors, defenders, judges, with the correction system, direction. Law and order will be brought about when we restore swift and certain penalties for these kinds of crimes, and criminals understand that they do the crime, they're going to do the time. And in doing so, it will result in peace once again for the capital city. And in doing that, the law-abiding citizens of this city and this county and this area, the metro area, will benefit, and the entire state will benefit. And we will, the law-abiding citizens of Hinds County and Jackson, Mississippi, will reclaim this city for its lawful citizens, for its people, for our people, for the next generation, most importantly for the next generation, for our children. Now, before I take questions, I want to remind you of a few more comments. We appreciate you, the media, because of what you do. You're part of public safety by reporting. And unfortunately, there are some questions due to this ongoing investigation that I cannot answer. I don't want to jeopardize that investigation. This is an ongoing war between law enforcement, law-abiding Mississippians, combined against criminals. Those criminals watch your reporting too, and in this war, I'm not going to compromise our battle plan here at the state fairgrounds by telling them the details of how we operate. It was a horrible, tragic incident, and we have multiple certified law enforcement officers on the scene, I'll say that much. And we will have that in place at every single event that happens here, including in the parking lots, as was evidenced Saturday. So with that, I'll take your questions.
Commissioner?
Yes.
You talked about the incident over the weekend. You said that individual who was shot and involved, that they broke through the fence, that they were not actually attending the Mudbug Festival, and they came onto the grounds or something and started this incident?
Well, we don't know how they got here, except they were in a car vehicle. We do know that vehicle in the parking lot.
Were they, so you don't know if they were actually attending the festival in this?
That I don't know.
Okay. Was there adequate security? Were people being, was it just kind of an open situation where people coming in, or was there security checking people for weapons?
There was security at every entrance, checking people. And as I mentioned, there was security in the parking lot. The moment it happened, we responded immediately.
But you weren't certain people's cars, honestly. Couldn't be that.
Well, it's probably unconstitutional to search everybody's car, because everybody has some sense of privacy in their vehicle. Under Mississippi law, I think it would be a challenge to do that, but also with thousands of cars driving in here, it's impossible to check it. No, not every car is checked.
Commissioner, would you consider, or is it under consideration in the future for future events here, to maybe have parking outside the fairgrounds so that all those coming inside could be checked if it got to that point?
Well, we always consider, and we constantly consider, recent events, recent developments, things that are happening, trends in the criminal environment. This fairgrounds is designed in such a way that you really must drive onto the fairgrounds to park in a parking lot. Now, I'm very pleased and I'm excited about the fact that we're obtaining the Draymond properties here off of Draymond Street. And I think 2 of those 3 have already been acquired, and they will soon be demolished, and that will become parking outside the gate, if you will, or a lot of parking. But until that happens, the reality is people drive on the fairgrounds for these events, and that is something we will be monitoring and looking at as we develop this new property. I'm sure that will give us some new opportunities that we've not had in the past.
I know you said you were grateful. I know you said you were grateful for the law enforcement response, getting the situation under control in 2 minutes. But there are questions about the security itself, just given the fact that this event even happened in the first place.
Well, events happen here all the time. I think that events happen at the fairgrounds probably more than anywhere else. They're not going to stop. We host the largest events in the state of Mississippi here. So anybody who's saying we shouldn't have had an event, I'd love to talk with them.
I'm talking about the incident, I should say. I apologize, Commissioner. The incident itself happening with the gunfire and everything. if there had been adequate security personnel, some would say that that shouldn't have even happened to begin with.
Well, you know, the old saying, you cannot control what other people do to you, but you can control how you respond. We do everything we can, and we do a great job. Our team does a fantastic job of preventing incidents, but I want to say that someone drives up in a personal car, and that is where this event began. I don't know what else could have been done except to respond to that, and our officers did a great job doing so.
How many were on duty, officers, at that night?
I'm not going to disclose exactly how many,
Why not?
because we don't want to give our battle plans to the enemy, but I'll say we had something less than, something with more than 2 dozen.
Okay, Commissioner, as we learned, those involved in the incident were minors, so will you all be placing parental guidance laws or guardian laws for future events here at the fairgrounds?
Ask that one more time, I'm sorry.
As we learned, those involved in the incident Saturday night were minors, will you all be placing parental guidance rules or guardian rules coming into events here at the fairgrounds?
Well, it's something that we would be willing to look at. We haven't made any decisions about this. I think the fact that they were all juveniles, they all were youth, is shocking to some people, shocking to me. I think that we'll, as we do with every plan, we'll take all these things into account, and we'll look at that in the future because we have to.
Commissioner, you were talking about Capital District. Public Safety this year during the session asked for, if I remember correctly, 75 additional Capitol Police officers. Legislature only funded 37 of them. What's your response when you hear the legislature cutting their funding, their request in half, yet they're dropping money, millions of dollars on golf courses, swimming pools, planetariums, etc.?
I support more law enforcement, not only in this Capitol Complex district, but all over the city of Jackson. I think the more law enforcement officers we have on duty all the time, the safer we will be.
But do you think they should have funded the full request?
Yes, I do. But as I know, I was in the legislature, there are a lot more requests that come in than you have money for. I'm glad that they funded the 37 new officers. That's a good start. I think this incident probably shows us probably just a good start. I would support more. I have no doubt the legislature will be responsive. They've already reached out to me about this, ways that they can help.
Commissioner, several had mentioned Capitol Police, people who had attended the event had mentioned Capitol Police didn't even show up to offer assistance. Were Capitol Police part of the security plan for the Mudbugs Festival this year?
I can't answer that except to say we had certified law enforcement officers who were not Capitol Police who were part of the security plan who responded directly.
Why are Capitol Police not a part of security of a state fair?
Well, Capitol Police are the police who patrol this area. They're here right now. We do work with them very closely, and they are. I would consider them part of our security plan every day. They do a lot of good work down here. They do excellent work, and I commend them for what they do. But on a per event basis, we actually contract out to specific certified law enforcement officers for security. That's what the law authorizes us to do. And the statute, I think, is specific code 69-531. That is where that authority lies, 69-531, and this is what we operate.
Is that one that didn't change?
Well, I had the legislators ask me if we should change that. I'm willing to talk to them, I'm willing to go over there, I'm willing to explore every avenue to make sure we have as much options for security as we have.
Okay, Commissioner, so we spoke briefly yesterday, and you told me that MIB had completed their investigation and that you would be sharing some of their findings. What happened between yesterday afternoon and now that you said the investigation now is still ongoing?
Well, I misunderstood. When I got information yesterday, the information was that the preliminary, review of information had been reviewed, and that it resulted in a longer, broader investigation. And that's going to go with us, so I can't comment.
Do you think the free admission policy could have contributed to this, and do you think you might be changing that next year?
Well, we have lots of events with free admission, parking. I don't think it
legislature for easy access to firearms. The fairgrounds has hosted a number of gun shows. Do you bear some responsibility for the proliferation of firearms to people both who want to use them for lawful causes and people who want to use them for criminal causes?
No, because as I mentioned, they actually have these weapons illegally. You asked how I know that. I know that because under federal law, it's illegal for anyone under 21 to buy, possess, own, or carry a firearm. Each of these suspects, as it was reported, was 15 to 17 years old. That's an automatic violation. What that tells you is they did not buy them legally. Someone broke the law, or they themselves broke the law to get these guns. And I have always been an advocate for Second Amendment rights. I always will be, will continue to be. And at the same time, do not support illegal and unlawful use and obtaining these types of weapons. And frankly, I'd like to know who gave them the weapons that out there.
Okay, Commissioner, so a lot of eyewitnesses at the Mudbug Festival said that they did see teens carrying guns. So will you address the open carry law here at the fairgrounds, or will you place restrictions moving forward for events you all will be hosting in the upcoming future?
We're going to follow the law. That's what we'll do. We always do at the state fairgrounds when it comes to firearms. Every Mississippi, every law-abiding Mississippi has the right to keep and bear arms for their personal defense. There's a separate statute in the law that every law-abiding Mississippi has the right to carry a firearm in their automobile while they're traveling away from home for their personal defense. None of those things are going to change. I think it would be a gross overreaction to take away the lawful Mississippians' gun rights to try to address an isolated incident like this. The right response is to go after the criminals and stop that criminal activity at its root.
Commissioner, are you certain that all of the gun shows are held here on the fairgrounds, that there are no people under 21 going to those gun shows purchasing weapons?
Yes, I'm certain that there are no sales, there are no transactions at these gun shows. Every one of those transactions complies with the federal law, which, as I mentioned, requires the buyer to be 21 years old. That is the fact.
What about transactions in the parking lots of these fairgrounds? We've heard about parking lot transactions involving minors and things of that nature happening. Because it's happening on the property of the fairgrounds, is there some responsibility that you, Commissioner, bear for that if it happens outside